Welcome, everyone, to the latest Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast, made possible thanks to Anna SI. I'm joined today by a host of Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Matthew Soltysiak joins us here today to have a conversation about the Detroit Lions, what he thought about last year, this year, where the future lies with this football team as the schedule came out. He had me on his Not the Same Old Lions podcast. We had a great conversation, and I apologize far too long to get you on here, but I'm looking forward to, really honestly, Matthew, having this conversation with you about the Detroit Lions.
No need to apologize. It was great having you on late last summer, getting ready for that epic 2024 season, and very thankful that you're extending the offer for me to be a guest on your show.
Yeah, no, it's a good opportunity now with the Detroit Lions. I like to get a broad range of perspectives on how people view the Detroit Lions. We're going to talk about the news of the day. We're going to talk about the schedule, the draft, lots of things to get Matthew's perspective as a content creator, what he's got going on. Definitely, obviously, he's liking where the Lions are at with the title of his podcast, Not the Same Old Lions. So I'm curious, let's start with the news of the day. Aiden Hutchinson did speak to the media, and he talked about, hey, I'm fully cleared. I've been cleared now for a little bit of time. He's now back in the fold. And now for Matthew, you clearly understand how important the defensive line is. Brad Holmes has basically said, hey, we're not going to invest in the top end free agents because we believe as an organization, Aiden Hutchinson is going to be the guy that's going to anchor this defensive line. He is a superstar, potential top 5 defensive end in the entire National Football League. How excited are you now? And just like everybody else, Aiden Hutchinson's back in the fold, pretty much expected to be available week 1.
Oh, that's huge news, right? I mean, and I think Calvin Shepard was even speaking about that recently, how Hutch looked in practice. And it was important because without him, that whole front defensive line looks different. And so the other thing is he's going to probably get that next really big contract, which is part of the reason why they're probably hesitant to bring somebody in and pay them some big money, because you can only pay so many people, and they've been paying a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's look, this is a player that's number 2 overall draft pick, expected to do a lot of big things. Where do you view Aiden as a player now? Clearly the injury now adds a little bit of a wrinkle to his evaluation, but you see now his numbers still are top ranked in PFF, even though he missed quite a bit of time. His pressures were up there. He was starting to put it together as a football player and was seriously, legitimately a defensive player of the year candidate. What do you think about Aiden Hutchinson now as a player, even though he's coming off of an injury?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, in college, he came off a pretty major injury as well and returned to pretty impressive form. I'm still thankful that Jacksonville passed on him in the draft. I mean, that just was like winning the lotto for the Lions at the number 2 spot. But you're right. You know, there's a lot of Detroit Lions players coming off of injury from this past season. And I think, I know we'll get to the keys to success later, but that's one of them is, can they return to that form? And Hutch said, if I'm not mistaken, he felt like he was hitting a different level last year before the injury took hold. And so he may be elevating his game still. And he has the entire offseason, because it happened early enough in the season that it's not like the same situation with Aleem McNeil where he's going to miss half the season. He's fully cleared now. So that means he's going to be able to get repping in the system with Calvin Shepard and just, building himself right back up to hopefully where he was right before the injury took place.
Yeah, and that's the big hope is that, okay, if you're going to go with Marcus Davenport, who has a history of injury, Aleem McNeil is now going to work his way back, probably expected back in the second half of the year. Aiden's got to come out again and kind of be that guy that gets home to the quarterback. That's the key. This football team, this defensive line can't pressure the quarterback. The numbers were there. The last step was being able to actually bring the quarterback down. And that's such a key thing, even though I know that, the coaching staff will downplay exactly the sack total number, but it's still an important play. It's a negative play for a defense. It puts the offense at a disadvantage and down in distance, and it just does so many good things for a football team. So yeah, Aiden Hutchinson's back. It's good to see him. And man, I think everybody, especially Aiden, is excited for the potential to see what he can do this year. If he can get anywhere near 10 sacks and get back to form throughout the course of 2025, look out. Then that puts the Detroit Lions in a very advantageous situation, especially with what we're going to talk about. So Matthew, like everybody else, we all peek at the schedule. You looked at it, you see kind of the early challenges with the division games, a quick opportunity to play the Packers and Bears. There's a stretch there where you play the AFC North, and then after the bye week, it gets a little bit tough with some matchups against the Commanders and the Eagles. What did you make of the schedule? And I know people are looking at the departure of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn and how difficult this schedule is, but there are opportunities versus some teams that I think there's some wins there that should help this football team get to double-digit wins. How did you look at the schedule as it played out? Is it really that tough? Like some people are making it out to be?
Well, I'll tell you this. When I first just learned of the opponents back like in January, I was like, oh, this isn't going to be fun. Especially when you saw the home and the away. Like, could we trade or swap a couple of those home and aways in those divisions? And I'd feel a little bit better because when I look at the schedule, I kind of go back to what Lomas Brown said back in the early 90s, the year the Lions went 12-4, and they won all their home games and they won half their road games. That would be pretty impressive this year. And I think all their home games are winnable. I think that's the easier part of their schedule. Now, as we know, John, no game is a guaranteed win in the NFL. You can lose any week. And the Lions do have some advantageous things, like you said. I mean, if you look at the travel distance, they don't have to travel, other than going to the Rams. They travel to KC in the middle of the country. Everything else is in the Midwest and the Northeast. So that is good. It's going to be hard. But the other thing a lot of other people might be overlooking is Philly's going to have a hard schedule. Washington has a hard schedule. The Bears have, I think, the hardest schedule. The Packers have a hard schedule. Like, everybody that's supposed to be good in the NFC has a tough schedule, and they're all pretty much playing each other. So I look at it as some 3-packs, right? You open the season, 3 tough games right there. At Chicago, home against the Bears. It's a 3-pack. I don't like opening against a division rival. I kind of wish the NFL wouldn't do that across the board. I think it gives you time to warm up a little bit against somebody else. And even if things don't go perfect, it's maybe not as consequential. And then later on, you've got that 3-pack with Kansas City, Tampa, and Minnesota right in a row. Cincinnati, Kansas City, and Tampa before the bye week. And then coming right out of the bye week, good thing you have that bye because you're busy right in a row with Minnesota, Washington, and Philly. So they're going to be tested early and often. But you said the concern some people have is the Lions lost their coordinators. They did, but they only lost 2 starters on this team. And there's going to be so much familiarity. They're going to learn some tweaks to the system and some adjustments to the offensive and defensive systems. But most of these players already know each other. And that right there is something that takes time to gel, and they won't have to do as much there.
Absolutely. And you hit on it. You hit on a key point. The players are the same. That offense still is expected to be prolific. John Morton said, why would I change what's working? Sam Laporta spoke to reporters, and he's like, why is everybody questioning my production? We scored the most points in the recent memory of the league. We're doing a lot of good things. It's sometimes not about individual success. It's about collectively. And yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get better. Jamison Williams is expected to continue to grow in this offense. I think the offensive line is going to take a step forward with the growth of Penei Sewell and some young rookies. I see a lot of good things as well. So it is tough, but I think that, which was good to see in a lot of articles that I was reading, the Lions were listed as some of the opponents' toughest games, as opposed to looking at, hey, the Lions face such a tough schedule. Hey, the Lions are coming to town for a lot of teams, and that's going to be a tough win for a lot of teams, especially knowing Dan Campbell's squad. But looking at the team and looking at where you see the avenues of success. So I pretty much will surmise and ask you what your early thoughts on what the record could be. But what are the keys for success for the Detroit Lions to potentially be able to get over 10 wins, double digits, and potentially earn a spot again in the playoffs?
I guess there's probably about 4 different things I look at. The one is going to be the most obvious to everybody, which is stay healthy, right? That just makes so much sense. But I think another 2 is, which people might be overlooking a little bit, is getting back healthy. How are those returning players going to be when they come back? Because we haven't seen them on the field for the most part, and some are going to be working their way back, like Aleem McNeil and Malcolm Rodriguez. Those guys aren't going to maybe be ready at McNeil should not be. Rodrigo, I think, is up in the air yet when he'll be ready. But how are all the returning guys from injury going to look when they come back? Will it be the same or better, or will there be a drop-off? And so hopefully it's equal or, picking up where they left off. You talked about the offensive line already. keeping the offensive line a strength is going to be really important because it has been. And, when Jonah Jackson left, they brought in Kevin Zeitler. Now Kevin Zeitler is out. Mahogany played well in spot duty, but they drafted, Tate Ratledge. And the great thing I think Penei Sewell was asked today is what's it going to be like with a new right guard there or whatever. And the realization was he's had a new right guard next to him every single year of his NFL career. So good. That means we got the right mentor next to him, and whoever fills that spot should be in good hands. And so those are three. I think another one that's really interesting is the Lions, if they can continue their streak of avoiding a losing streak, that would be incredible because it started back in 2022. They started that season 1-6, as you probably remember, John. And it was like, week 9, they entered a game on a 5-game skid against the Packers. And that, I went to that game. I actually dressed as Dan Campbell for that game because it was right after Halloween. And I got to shout out to the coach from the sideline, got his attention. He was as personable as everybody says he is who's met him in person. But they won that game against the Packers. I think Hutchinson had an interception in that game. And the Lions went to 8-2 to finish that season. Since that win, the Lions have not lost 2 games in a row. And John, you probably know as well as I do, I don't think any other team in the NFL can boast that. And when you can bounce back from losses like that, that puts you in a different category for teams than other teams in the league, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it. Very much so. The team is able to withstand setbacks, has the right gritty mentality that, hey, sometimes things are not going to go right. You're going to have some bad losses. And to your point, the pressure was mounting there at the end of the year last year. They had a game at home against the Vikings, all the marbles. Everybody was looking at it going, how's this Lions team going to handle all this pressure without all these players? And boom, they're still able to handle business and soundly against the Viking squad. So you're absolutely right. And I think that, for this football team, I do also think one of the big keys is the play of Jared Goff. I think that a quarterback in his prime, any team's going to go how their quarterback goes. And it's always interesting to look at where Jared Goff's at, how he's going to adapt now with a new offensive coordinator. I do think that John Morton is going to be pretty wise and tailor an offense and play calls that are going to suit Jared Goff. And something that I think is underrated, Matthew, that's interesting too, is that I think Jared Goff's going to take a little bit more control of this offense. I think he'll have opportunities to check out of things he doesn't like and to get into things. And I do think that the framework of the offense should be very, very familiar to Jared Goff and allow this offense to continue to purr and score a lot of points. But on the other side of the ball, I do think there's opportunities for growth for some young players. And 2 most notably are 2024 draft picks, because early on, the return, not as expected. I think many people felt like maybe Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw could do a little bit more in their rookie year. Not to say that they're not going to end up being quality players, but at least for the initial season that they had, Ennis Rakestraw dealt with a lot of injuries, and Terrion Arnold, look, we know, Matthew, that position is just brutal to learn. And the stretch of athletes that he was going up against, the Justin Jeffersons of the world, and how quickly you have to acclimate. And it took him a little bit of a while. Too handsy, as most people were saying about Terrion Arnold. But now, look, rookie season's over. The free pass is basically over. Now it's time to produce. It's a situation in which their former defensive coordinator is now somewhere else, and they're tasked with, luckily, the defensive backs coach remains in Deshae Townsend, and they get to work with a familiar face in Calvin Shepard. But what do you expect from young defensive backs? Because we all know, Matthew, how great the safeties are. We know what they bring to the table, the best in the league. If the cornerback spot, along with DJ Reed, can take a step forward, now we're talking about some, really elevated potential, maybe even top 10 NFL defense.
I know this could be the best. This has to be the best secondary at this point in the season that Brad Holmes and Dan Kimmel have ever had to work with. And 2 years ago, I thought they were in a really good spot, and that kind of fell apart. But they kept it together with bandages and tape, and they made it work all the way to the NFC Championship game. But now, you're right. It's a whole different level. You got those safeties in there. We're hoping that DJ Reed is just a swap out for Carlton Davis, right? And I don't really care about the debate of who's better or not. I think they're both in the same category. You've got a starting level number 1 defensive back there. So can Terrion Arnold be the number 2? And I think the honest answer is yes. And by the end of the season, I think it could develop into a 1A, 1B situation. And Arnold has that much potential. And yeah, he had those flags early in the season. He was a little handsy. but he wasn't getting beat on plays. He wasn't being, taken out of his shoes and misreading plays and being beat on coverage. So he didn't look like a guy that was lost out there. So I'm really optimistic on what Terrion Arnold can bring this year. And then, as we heard recently from the coaches, Ennis Rakestraw is going to be playing on the outside. They're going to have him out there because they love what Amit could do inside and outside, but I think they want Amit at the nickel. But if Rakestraw can take some steps forward, and again, last year was almost a lost season for him with those injuries. And you're right, Terrion's the only starter the Lions really had last year out of that draft class early on. And so there was more hope, but in some ways they didn't need it all because of Carlton Davis being there for the 1 year. I do think Ennis Rakestraw is going to, that's a guy that some of us thought that if the Lions took him in the first round, we'd be happy with. And so the fact that we got him in the second round last year, there's still a lot of potential with him. He could be arguably the best number 3 defensive back in the league by the end of the season, just depending how things go. So I'm loving that. And then there's even more depth behind those guys this year. You're right, John. The secondary here could become a strength for the first time in a long time. I mean, it was pretty solid last year. I mean, it was really solid until Carlton and Amik both went down. I mean, that was just devastating late in the season like that.
Yeah, and I like the fact, too, that it's underrated. Amik Robertson, if something happens, I think provides this football team a player that can play in the nickel spot and also play outside. You saw what he did against Justin Jefferson. I do think that he's going to take another challenge saying, okay, you went out and paid, DJ Reed, and now he's in an opportunity where he can earn even more dollars in a contract. I do think he's going to bring it. I think he's going to be an unsung hero, underrated football player for this football team. And for Ennis Rakestraw, I think there's an opportunity there where, hey, they know probably he's got strengths at the nickel spot, but, the Lions, Matthew, I think you get a sense, they like versatility. They like having guys like Brian Branch who can be, one of the top safeties in the league, but also play on the outside, play at the nickel spot, just be a player that you can count on. And that's what some of the coaching staff would say is that, look, yeah, when we would ask about Ifeatu Melifonwu, they would say, look, he's just a defensive back. We can put him in a couple different spots and he could do some things. It's just unfortunate he couldn't stay healthy. But for Rakestraw, I'm curious. I do think that many people are sleeping on him because sometimes fans, when they see a player have a down year with injuries, they think that's it. I do think he's going to come back a little bit stronger and compete. And I think that might help his motivation coming in, knowing that, okay, there's some significant competition with DJ Reed and Amik Rakestraw and Amik Robertson. If he doesn't step up, Rakestraw might end up not getting some playing time.
Well, yeah. And, I think you hit the nail on the head. I call it positionless football. I mean, your offense or defense, but you're going to be doing lots of different things. And you saw the Lions moving, Derek Barnes around in that respect as well. But yeah, moving the versatility with those safeties in the nickelback and the outside. I mean, that creates a matchup nightmare for offenses on how to scheme against it. So I think you're right. I think you're going to see them like to cross train, but we saw that on the offensive line, right? Ratledge was already taking snaps at center, I think, in minicamp. So they're loving to cross train players because it just provides you that much more depth should an emergency situation take place.
Absolutely. And I do think that, if the Lions can get some contributions from some of the players that were drafted in 25, as well as the growth of some players from 2024, as well as maybe growth from Giovanni Manu, Broderick Martin, some of the players that they're expecting to continue to grow, maybe have some impact, that kind of just bodes well for this football team. So I'm definitely expecting big things from both. And I do think the competition level, I do think that they both have the right mindset. They want to get better. They don't like the fact that they maybe didn't execute at the level that they wanted. I mean, Terrion Arnold comes in and says he wants to be a guy that gets the yellow jacket right away. And I do think that a guy with that attitude will continue to get better. So now turning our attention, I'm curious what you thought of the draft. I thought that there were 7 athletes they picked, and I do think that the top of the draft that they got in regards to Tyleik Williams, Tate Ratledge, and Isaac Tesla have the most of an opportunity to contribute in 2025. The rest, opportunities to develop and get some special teams value, most notably out of Dan Jackson and the development of Ahmed Hassanin. I do think that he's going to continue to develop and maybe get some impact later on in the year. But we all know that some of the players in the 6th and 7th round, they're a little bit more raw, a little bit more of players that need time to develop and get after it. So I don't expect big contributions in regards to the stat sheet in 2025. But I'm curious what you thought about the draft, and Did you like the strategy in the way in which Brad Holmes, if they scout you and they like you, they have no problem trading assets and getting aggressive? I thought it was eye-opening when he went on the radio station on the flagship and said, I tried to make 30 deals to try and get up for a player that maybe probably was a defensive end, but it just didn't work out. And they were able to eventually move up for Isaac Tesla. What did you make overall of the draft? And are you liking what you've seen the last couple of years with Brad Holmes and his aggressiveness?
Well, I will say Brad Holmes says they never draft for need, but it seems like this year they hit every need in that draft in those first 3-round picks, right? And the aggressiveness, in general, yes. I mean, if you see a player you like and you can get it for the right price, I mean, the Jamison Williams trade, we gave up like very little to move up very far to go get him. Now, the Isaac Tesla, we gave up a lot more. And so when you give up more, there's a little bit more risk reward that comes with something like that. But if you start with Tyleik Williams on the defensive line right there, that makes a lot of sense because, DJ Reader is under contract for one more year with the Lions. Levi Onwuzurike came back on a 1-year deal for the Lions. Aleem McNeil is coming back from injury. That was a great spot, a great guy to grab right there. Was I interested in a defensive end early like a lot of other people? Sure. But not opposed to a defensive tackle because we know if they can stop the run, makes the other team more one-dimensional. And if you can stop the run and only rush 4 guys, you can drop 7 into coverage. Tate Ratledge, man, if that guy, that was a great pick. I mean, especially if you always see them cross-training him at center already. Getting younger and staying healthy on the offensive line is huge and staying talented on there. And that's been kind of what the Lions have wanted to do since Campbell and Holmes got there, is to bring young guys in. And I think Miles Frazier is going to fall into that category as well. Later pick, could be a top backup and develop into a starter. But Tesla, they liked him. They went after him. We've heard there were other people that were maybe interested in grabbing him before he would have gotten to the Lions. I'll be honest, Tesla was not on my radar as a guy the Lions might be interested in, nor that early. But I'll say this. If you look at Brad Holmes' track record, he's hit pretty well. And former GMs of the Lions have taken guys out of the blue, and that didn't work out at all. And so, but their track record wasn't like Brad Holmes. So I'm going to give Brad Holmes the benefit of the doubt on this and say, you know what? The speed, the size of Tesla, and his ability to catch the ball. I mean, he's got a reputation for catching the ball. You put him and St. Brown on the same field, throw Sam Laporta on there. I mean, those are some great targets there as far as guys that are great at catching the ball naturally. I think you're right on Ahmed Hassanin. He's extremely interesting, fascinating. Maybe becomes a fan favorite like Malcolm Rodriguez, but the state of the roster is significantly different than when Malcolm Rodriguez came out, right? And so it's much deeper. So it's going to be harder for him to get on the field and be maybe as impactful early on in most situations. But that's not a guy I'm betting against, and it's a guy I'm naturally rooting for based on all the things you hear about this guy's character and his maybe even his love for was it lobster, macaroni, and cheese. So he just has such a great story, and he seems like an Aiden Hutchinson type high energy guy who's just motivated, self-motivated, and that's what the Lions look for, right? Are a lot of self-motivated players. Jackson could provide some special teams help. Same for Lovett. And maybe develop into a backup safety because we are going to need somebody behind those top 2 guys. And that might be Avonte Maddox in the meantime, but it doesn't hurt bringing somebody else in the room. But I'm optimistic about this draft class. I like it. Again, would I have liked a defensive end early? Yeah, it sounds like Holmes went for one or tried to get one. And you can only draft the guys that are there. And if no one's willing to trade with you, you can't do it. And the Lions aren't, that defensive end group, they seem pretty excited about it. And I don't think it's done yet. I still think there's that outside chance that Darius Smith comes back.
Yeah, and that would excite a lot of the fans that are questioning the opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. They're not as, let's just say they're not as confident in Marcus Davenport, maybe as they should, but it's understandable given what's happened with Davenport. And no, look, the draft strategy, every general manager is going to have some issues. There's going to be some things that they could have done differently, but clearly they identify traits, intangibles that they feel can help a football player develop, and then they give them the opportunity to grow in the system. So it's hard to argue when you have a 2-time executive of the year, the respect that Brad Holmes has across the league. And look, he's been honest. The team has bills to pay. They just paid Kirby. They paid Aiden. They're about to probably pay Aiden. They paid Panay Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they have future bills to look at. And it's not going to be, when you have good football players, they don't remain inexpensive to keep on the roster. So I'm curious because I do think it's very, very intriguing to look at who you would prioritize. So let's play a round of keep two, let one lines player go. Because look, it's one of those deals where everyone knows, okay, Jameson Williams did not yet get a long-term contract extension. Many people believe, all right, the reason why is, wide receivers are a position that you can look in the draft to invest in. You can replace wide receivers a little more easier than tight ends and running backs. And so people are wondering, okay, what does that mean for the future of Jameson Williams? Who do you invest in? Some people are like, you never, ever, ever pay running backs. You don't. You just draft them, run them for 5 years, and then get another running back. But look, Jahmyr Gibbs is a player that has a chance to be very special. And if you look at how the Saints treated Alvin Kamara, he's been there for quite a bit of time. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. You're allowed to keep two, but one's got to hit the road because you can't keep everybody. And I know the easy answer is I want everybody, but keep two, let one go. What does Matthew say?
All right, and who are the three players?
Yep, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta,
okay.
Jahmyr Gibbs on the offense.
All right. Well, let's start with Sam Laporta, right? 86 catches, 10 touchdowns his rookie year, 60 last year with 7 touchdowns. Those are pretty impressive for a tight end. He said he's coming off the season healthy and rested, like his first offseason rest in like 2 to 3 years. So we could see more out of Sam Laporta this coming year than we've ever seen out of him, or matching. I mean, if he matched his rookie season, that's pretty darn incredible. Jameson Williams had his first 1,000-yard season last year, 58 catches, 7 touchdowns. The Lions picked up his 5th-year option, so they have Laporta and they have Jamo for 2 more years before they have to make a full decision. Jahmyr Gibbs. I know there's that positional value, John. I'm not sure what your thought was on draft night on that. I was all in because the way I see it, anytime the Lions ever had to play against an offense that had a good running back, it changed the entire calculus. And he just missed 1,000 yards his rookie year. He had 1,412 yards last year with 16 touchdowns and 52 receptions. I mean, and I don't even know how many receiving touchdowns he had, but that was incredible. So you don't have to make a decision on him for 3 years yet because you're going to probably pick up his 5th-year option if you don't make if you don't do the franchise tag, if you don't extend him ahead of time. So I'm going to answer your question this way. I'm keeping Jahmyr Gibbs. The jury's out on Laporta and Jamo for 1 more year. I want to buy 1 more year. I don't have to make the decision for 2. I want to see them 1 more year because they both bring different skill sets. I mean, remember that Washington game, the playoff game, which we don't want to remember? Laporta's touchdown catch in the back of the end zone, 1 arm diving sideways. That man can catch the ball anywhere. And Jamo's speed is something you can hardly match on any NFL field. They both bring some very incredible traits. I want to see what they do in year, we'll call it year 3, essentially, because Jamo was out that first year. I want 1 more year on them before I decide who I would want to give that contract to. But Jahmyr, I'm signing that guy up. I mean, how big of a mistake do you think the New York Giants are thinking about Saquon Barkley right now? And how great did that Derrick Henry signing look for, the Ravens? So I'm all in on Jahmyr.
No doubt. It's interesting to look at, too, because you also have Jack Campbell to look at and a player that we're going to end this show talking about. I'm curious what your sense is because it's a very intriguing look at rewarding players, what a player looks, what a player does for the team. I'm sure you saw how Alex Anzalone has been acting on social media, the way he's kind of been posting, hey, a little bit of self-love about, hey, how good he's been doing, what he brings to the table, his value in regards to how the defense looked when he was gone versus when he was in the lineup. Where do you stand in regards to a player that signed a 3-year deal? This is the last year of that deal. He clearly is underpaid. He's a good football player. I understand both sides of the coin and the argument. I'm of the opinion that I do think that before training camp, he'll probably get 1 more year added to the contract to keep him here in 25 and 26, a little bit more guaranteed dollars. and something in the neighborhood of maybe 2 years, 18 million, a little bit more than Derek Barnes, a little bit of a reward for the 4 years that he put in. But some would argue, and it's fair to argue, let him play out his deal. If he plays well, that's motivation for him, like an Amik Robertson, that, hey, you're under contract. There's no need to allocate any more funds. That, hey, go play and see what you can do. Bet on yourself. And if you are a player that continues to showcase what you can do at 31 years old, then we'll revisit it at the end of the year. What do you think about Alex Anzalone? Would it behoove the Lions to extend him now, or should they play it out, or maybe even say, Jack, it's your team after 2025?
Well, I'm going to side with you on this one, and not just. I mean, I like your opinion on it, but also I think the Lions have shown a little bit of this for a couple of reasons. One, you build the culture by doing the players right, and Alex Anzalone was one of those first guys that came over here. And if you look at history, look what happened with David Montgomery. They got him over here, and they got him on a sweet deal. I mean, a year or two later, DeAndre Swift got paid more money to go to the Bears than David Montgomery got paid to go to the Lions. And you're like, how does that happen? Well, markets change. And the Lions didn't wait for Montgomery's contract to expire. They extended him. John, if they just did a 1-year add-on and brought it up a little bit, maybe just a little bit above Derek Barnes, we're not trying to reset the market here, but reward the player for what he's done and what he's currently doing, because there was no doubt how much better that defense got. That Minnesota Viking game in week 18 was incredible. I mean, you talk about sacks changing the thing. I mean, Zadarius Smith getting Sam Darnold way back there. Well, that's a team effort on work, making so many other things happen. And Anzalone was flying all over that field, making plays. And the defense was significantly better with him on the field. So, and that's the other good thing is, if you're only adding 1 year to the deal, that's a smart contract. That's the thing the Lions have avoided. The 49ers are in a situation where they made a very big contract offer to Brock Purdy, and it might work out, but you've got that word might in there, which, puts a little bit more guesswork into things. The big thing is you want to avoid bad contracts, but you want to reward the players that are there who have done things. This is a perfect happy medium. You're not going overboard, but you're giving him a little bit more security and a little bit of a reward for what he has done. And anytime you go to work and you feel appreciated, you tend to do your job better. And the Lions have done a great job of that ever since Sheila, Brad, and Dan have been in charge. So, if they did something like that, what you were suggesting, I think that'd be a perfect move.
Absolutely. A veteran leader, plays well. You saw the difference in the defense. The numbers were night and day. Yards per game, touchdowns, points, everything just went in the opponent's favor when he went out. When he came back, it was like a jolt to the defense, and he was able to really help this defense get to the NFC North Division Championship for back-to-back years. So I'm very curious to look at this, when you look at Alex Anzalone as a veteran, I think that he's a player that this kind of a heartbeat kind of guy, glue guy. And I don't know if the Lions are in the market to potentially let guys like that go. So I'm very curious to see how it all shakes out with the Detroit Lions in 2025, but I definitely get your optimism. I enjoy it. Tell the audience where they can find your show, where they can find you on social media. I like your takes. I like the way you deliver your knowledge of the Detroit Lions. You're a fan of the team and definitely a supporter, going out there and even dressing up like Motor City Dan Campbell out there and getting his attention. So it's a coach that is now ingratiating himself and one of the most popular figures in town. And yeah, like you said, I think he's just a down-to-earth, honest football coach that is working his tail off to try and get this football team a Lombardi trophy. I think it could happen, but I'm not so certain in 2025 with the way the schedule could work out and all that kind of stuff. But with the young talent, I do see sustained success, and I do see opportunities for this football team to get multiple cracks at that Lombardi trophy. And if there's two guys that deserve it, it's Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Where can people find you and your knowledge at the Not the Same Old Lions podcast?
Well, and John, you're right. And I just want to point out real quick that costume of Dan Campbell, the Lions were 1-6 when I did that. So it wasn't like I was riding like the fan wave doing that. But you're right. Since those guys have taken over and Sheila, it's been a different story. As far as finding Not the Same Old Lions podcast, you can find us on most major streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find the video version of the podcast on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter and other social media platforms like, I guess you would say, Blue Sky sometimes, and Instagram. We are on Instagram now too.
Absolutely. Find the content creators. I think the Lions community as a whole, really solid with content creators, journalists all over that get great guests, great insights, and make sure you support those that are doing it and doing it on a regular basis. Make sure you check out Not the Same Old Lions podcast. And Matthew, let me tell you, I'm allowed to be invited more than once. I'm available. Hit me up. Maybe we'll have this conversation on your platform prior to the year of training camp to get the inside scoop of what's going on with the Detroit Lions. But for sure, we're going to have you on the Lions on SI Lone Wolves podcast. I like the conversation. It flew by, and I definitely enjoyed your perspective and your diligence in what you do, and to keep doing it, keep going, and keep pushing through with all the digital content. It's just great. You're an asset to the content creator community, and I look forward to listening to more episodes of Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week, maybe a little bit after the holiday, for another Detroit Lions